everyone, and welcome to Divinely Empowered with Antonia. Today we have Dr. Christine Bishara. Now, Dr. Christine has been working in medicine for many years, and she focuses on gut health and how the gut affects everything else in the body and how it's really the bedrock for health. We're going to be talking about some of my stuff, emotional trauma, and how that affects. We're also going to be talking about weight loss and what some of those weight loss drugs on the market, the ones which are diabetes-based, how they're affecting the gut and what's actually going on in our bodies with all of these. So one not to miss. So thank you, Christine, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. Okay. Where would you like to start
today? Color-wise.
Oh, yeah, we are, aren't we? That's nice. Red, we're like powerful today.
Yes.
Okay, so tell us about the gut and how it affects mental health. Let's go in hard.
All right. So a lot of people don't even realize that the gut has all these microbes that live in our gut, and they're really kind of our helpers. Some are good, some are bad. But we want more of the good microbes because what they do is they help to regulate our immune system. But one particular thing that they also do is they really help with our mental health. So a lot of people ask, like, how does that work? Well, serotonin is predominantly made in our gut, believe it or not. And it comes from, go ahead. Did you have a question?
Sorry, would you tell people what serotonin is? Just
good idea. Yes. So serotonin is one of the neurotransmitters, one of our main neurotransmitters that helps with our mood. It helps to stabilize our mood, but it also helps with initiation of sleep cycles. So a lot of times people who are deficient in serotonin will find that their mood is low. If it's severe deficiencies, they'll find that they're very depressed. But also difficulty sleeping. So serotonin is made from amino acid precursors. Like all things in our body, we have precursors, right? And so the amino acid precursor of serotonin is called tryptophan. And tryptophan, believe it or not, is something that our body is not able to make. So we must obtain tryptophan from food. And what happens is if we're not eating foods that have any tryptophan in them, we're not going to be able to make as much serotonin. So the way I see it is if your gut is not healthy and you're not eating foods that have enough tryptophan to make that serotonin, you're going to start feeling it mentally. Your energy is going to be lower. You're just going to have a depressed mood. So what I do in my practice is we take the background that I have in internal medicine and learning about the body and incorporate ways that allow you to make your body the doctor, basically. So I'm giving patients tools and knowledge that allow them to really empower themselves and eat the right foods, but also a lot of it is mental health too, and just really focusing on healing from within, which is why my website is called From Within Medical. Antonia, I can't hear you.
Sorry, there we go. I heard that potatoes help you produce serotonin. Is this one of the
potatoes, I don't know if they have a lot of tryptophan in them, but they have resistant starch and they have carbohydrates.
Potatoes, I remember from years ago. Is there some correlation? Instead, if you eat a lot of potatoes, it makes you happy. Maybe that's just because they're delicious. But
well, they have resistant starch, and that feeds our gut microbiome, and our good bacteria love food that they like, which is resistant starch, a lot of high fiber foods, especially containing something called inulin, which is what they feed on. And when they're happy, they produce these byproducts that make us happy. So while potatoes are good, it's not good to have them in a larger amount just because they are a little bit of a higher glycemic index, but they do have resistant starch, which does help with, making us feel better because they're feeding our happy gut microbes.
So what food does make us happy then? What boosts our serotonin?
Yeah, so the foods that make us make more serotonin are tryptophan-rich foods. So a lot of those are foods like walnuts. Walnuts, pecans are very rich in tryptophan. They help us to make more serotonin. Foods like bananas are also very rich in tryptophan. Edamame, which is soybeans, also very rich in tryptophan. Foods like avocados, turkey meat, foods like that are also rich in tryptophan. Eggs. So some people, choose more of a plant-based, which is fine. But there are some meats also that have tryptophan. But I would say if you're going to pick two, walnuts and bananas are your two big ones.
What meats are great for tryptophan?
Turkey's really good. Eggs are really good. All meats have a little bit of tryptophan. I don't know if you've heard of that tryptophan coma that Americans kind of use that more, where like after Thanksgiving turkey, they have all that food. Part of it is,
I haven't called it a tryptophan coma. I've heard a food coma. Is that the
yes,
same?
well, food coma. What happens with food coma, and it's partly due to that, is you eat so much and all the blood supply kind of focuses on the gut. And then you're not having as much blood, circulating to your brain. And so you're kind of just like really drowsy, and that's kind of it. But, tryptophan.
Wine might also be a factor. Who knows?
Which one?
The wine.
The wine, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, so so you do lots of different tests on people and their gut to find out their overall health. How does that all work?
Yeah. So when someone sees me, I like to really dig deep and find out everything about them. And so I'll ask a lot of questions that relate to childhood, whether or not they were breastfed, what kind of stressors they have, because those all really play a role. And then we do something where we check for like how deficient or how dominant they have in neurotransmitters. So we'll check that as well, because that definitely affects their health. But I also look at the gut with a gut microbiome analysis test. And that basically you take a sample of stool, you look at the species that are living in your gut, because believe it or not, we have these trillions of microorganisms living in our gut. Some of them are good, some are bad. And certain people, they have a good ratio where there's a lot of good bacteria in there, and they produce these things for us that help with our health, our immune system, but also our mental health. And some people don't have good levels. So, and this is actually also related to who got really sick from COVID versus who didn't. So a lot of people wonder why children didn't really get sick from COVID. And it's because they have a high percentage of a specific bacteria that helps with their immune system. So when we did our research, we found that children weren't getting as sick because they had so much of this bacteria called Bifidobacterium. Some adults don't have as much if they're eating a lot of processed foods or just not healthy foods that are feeding these bacteria. So I'm a big believer in all disease starts in the gut. And we look at the gut first, and we kind of decide what do we need to do food-wise, but also supplement-wise to help increase the beneficial bacteria that might be deficient in certain people.
Lovely. So tell me about breastfed. How does that affect?
So breast milk is called liquid gold for a reason. So it kind of goes back to that bacteria that I was mentioning. So children's guts have this specific bacteria called Bifidobacterium in larger numbers. I would say about 60 to 70% of their gut has this one bacteria. And it's almost like nature's way of kind of helping them adapt to the system and to just all the exposures that they're having. So it's like giving their immune system a little bit of a boost. Now, breast milk, what that does is it actually increases a specific type of bacteria called Bifidobacterium breve. So that's a strain of this bacteria that we just mentioned. And Bifidobacterium breve in many research studies has been shown to help strengthen a child's immune system. It also helps with certain conditions like in infants. If, for example, they're born premature and they have a premature digestive system, if they're breastfed, it actually helps to heal a little bit faster. It helps prevent conditions later on like asthma and eczema we've seen. So breast milk is the only substance that can increase this one bacteria, which is Bifidobacterium breve. There's different strains of Bifidobacterium, but that one specific strain is exclusive to breast milk, and it has a lot of really good benefits. So I tell women, even if you can't breastfeed for a long time, even just a week, even if you have a baby who's in ICU, for example, and you're not able to breastfeed, pump that milk, save that milk for the baby, because that's really setting their microbiome and their health, setting up for life.
So you can't get this in prebiotics or probiotics or any biotics.
You can get Bifidobacterium. There's probably hundreds of strains of Bifidobacterium. There's Bifidobacterium longum. I don't want to get too detailed to bore people, but there are many strains of Bifidobacterium. And yes, you can get them in a probiotic. They're really good to get in foods like yogurt and kefir, for example, but also really fiber-rich foods like artichokes and asparagus also help to feed that specific bacteria in the gut. Okay. So if you think about the gut, and like, it's almost like you have these little like kids in your gut that you're feeding, and you want to feed the good ones so that they can produce these great byproducts. But yeah, so breastfeeding is the only source that we know that increases this one specific strain of bifidobacterium, which has been shown to really help. But all of the strains of bifidobacterium help with our health.
So does junk food feed the bad bacteria?
Yes, exactly. Yes. Oh. Yes. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is, if you have more bad bacteria than good bacteria in your gut, they're going to start occupying, if you think about your gut, the lining of your gut, they're going to start occupying that lining. It's almost like soldiers kind of lined up. So you want the good soldiers, right, which are the good bacteria, occupying the space in your gut lining. Because what happens is they're really good soldiers, and they don't allow bad toxins to leak out into the bloodstream. They're really good. But what happens is, if bad bacteria take over and there's more of them, it's almost like they start depleting the good guys, and then they weaken the gut lining. And when your gut lining is weaker, you tend to develop a condition called leaky gut, because then the lining's kind of letting things seep through. And when that seeps through the bloodstream, your immune system sees that as something odd, and it kind of develops this reaction. And that's where we get this term inflammation from. So
I've heard with leaky gut that one of the causes is hard, jaggedy food. Is this accurate? So it's like eating cereals and eating things which are just intrinsically hard. They actually end up breaking through the gut lining and causing leaky gut, because they're not digested, too fibrous. Maybe brown rice would be one, because it's got a hard shell, and various different cereals, because they don't actually go mushy, which means that they end up almost like just decaying and rubbing away at the gut lining. Is that something you agree with?
I don't know if I would say necessarily hard substances, because we have foods like broccoli or cauliflower that are kind of rough on the surface, right?
No, I mean like
you're talking about grains, like really strong.
I'm thinking about grains, but no, cereals, like very hard cereals that really break down.
I'm not a fan of cereal as like your fiber source, because not only that, but a cereal usually stays in the gut a little bit longer. And what happens is, when it stays in the gut a little longer, there's bacterial overgrowth. So bacteria like feeding, bad bacteria, and then they start releasing these toxins, and those start to weaken the gut also. So yes, in a way, like oatmeal, everybody's like, oh, I'm eating oatmeal, it's really healthy. I'm not a fan of oatmeal, to be honest.
No, oatmeal being one of them. Yeah, that's one of the things.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. So I guess in a way, yes. But I'm also somebody who says, like, you don't have to restrict completely. If your diet is predominantly healthy and you're eating enough plant-based foods that help to keep those kind of good soldiers lining up, then the occasional cereal, the occasional, cookie, the occasional whatever is not going to be strong enough to break down the barrier. But if it's the other way around, then that's where you really start, going into problems with weakening of the gut and just making it less strong and allowing stuff to leak out.
Okay. So you're a weight loss specialist, and I've just been reading some of your testimonials, and they sound wonderful. So how do people lose weight? At the $1 million question, is it just calorie deficit? What is, it is calorie deficit, and, the more you move, the less calories you consume. Maybe if you're having intermittent fasting, but just basically eating less gets you thin. Is that just how it is, or is there more to it?
It's $1 million question, but it's also $1 million answer, because it's not one factor.
$1 million industry. So it must be.
But it's a lot simpler than people think it is. And again, it kind of goes back to the gut again. You're feeding the gut. If you're feeding the bad bacteria, those bad bacteria are like monsters in your gut, and they are never satisfied. So they actually do send signals to your brain, like asking for more. It's like you're feeding a monster. They just want more and more and more. So your appetites really increase. So really, again, the key to weight loss is, yes, you're right, calorie restriction. But then you see a lot of people who are restricting calories, and then either they don't lose weight as easily, or they gain weight right after. And it's really because you're not feeding your gut, and you're not strengthening your gut. So the core of what I do in weight loss is, you look at the gut and you want to feed the good bacteria, because the good bacteria, believe it or not, send these signals to the brain satiety center, shutting it off. So when they're satisfied, they send signals to let us know that we're satisfied. So a lot of people talk about like the new injectable medications, the GLP-1s and all of that, and how they work. They decrease appetite. How do they decrease appetite? Well, one, they work on these receptors, but they also release these signaling pathways that send our signals to our brain. But guess what? Our bacteria, the good bacteria, are doing the same thing. It's called a PYY signaling pathway. They're actually activating those signaling pathways. So I always tell people, if you're eating the right foods, you're going to signal to your brain that you're full. You don't need the medications. So yes, while calorie restriction does matter, there's a lot of factors that help with weight loss. I know
I have a theory. Maybe I'm right. Maybe tell me if I'm right. I have a theory about being hungry. And I think that one of the reasons that many people who are hugely overweight, I think that they are very hungry, many of them. And I think the reason that many of them are very hungry is because they lack nutrition. So I think that they may be eating foods which has zero nutrition. And like a lot of junk food is literally nutrition void. And sometimes it actually leaches nutrition from the body from processing. So I think potentially one of the reasons that they're so darn hungry is because their body's going, just give me some nutrition, eat, just because they're looking for those vitamins and minerals to sustain themselves. So I think that, you know, having higher quality food, you'll be full faster and you won't be hungry, because you're sort of full for 10 minutes and then you're like, your body's still going, oh my goodness, I still need the nutrition. I'm still craving all of these things. And craving comes potentially from a lack of something that you need in your system. How do you feel?
You're 100% correct. And actually, one of the first things that I say to my weight loss patients, I say this all the time, is your body's not craving food, it's craving nutrients. Your body will figure out whatever it needs to do. If it has to make you hungry to get that serotonin, for example, it will make you hungry, right? But a lot of times your body just wants that quick relief. It wants to just like, you know, it wants to feel better. So it'll make you crave like crunchy, salty foods to feel temporarily great, right? But then in the long run, you're not making enough of the neurotransmitters that your body needs. So yes, you're absolutely correct. It craves nutrients and it will figure out a way to get those nutrients, and it'll make you hungry. But if you're eating healthy, good foods that are really rich in a lot of nutrients, it's almost like your gut bacteria are satisfied and they send signals to your brain saying that they're satisfied. So I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah, because it's interesting. If you look at horses, for example, when they're poorly, they go and eat particularly different plants, which are the medicines that they need from there. Yes. You know, and I think it's really interesting with also pregnant ladies, because they end up craving all sorts of weird things like coal. I don't even know what nutrients are in coal, but there must be something, because that's something which is quite a common craving for people.
Yeah.
What's in coal? Do you have any idea what's in coal?
Coal and dirt, kind of the same thing. It's actually an indicator of iron deficiency, which is very common in women, right? Because baby takes all the iron stores. And so a lot of women will say they crave coal or dirt, like they want to actually eat dirt. And that's actually a condition where it's usually related to iron deficiency. So you're 100% correct. And actually, as part of my evaluations is I'll do a very thorough questionnaire, and I'll find out what specific cravings people have. So a lot of times people who crave like very sweet things or chocolatey things, you'll find that they're deficient in dopamine, for example, or people that crave like really fatty foods. Is your body is deficient in a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, and that choline molecule is actually a fat molecule. So when your body's craving or needs more acetylcholine, it's got to figure out a way to get it. So you'll end up eating like not healthy fatty foods, you know, like fried chicken or whatever, where in fact, if you eat more healthy fatty foods like avocados, for example, or wild salmon that have naturally high fat content, you'll actually start making more acetylcholine and your body won't be craving that anymore. So it's really intricate. And so it's hard when you ask about like, what do I do for weight loss? It's really based on the person, what they're deficient in, what they need, what their body needs. And this is why I tell people your body really is the best doctor, because I can give you the tools and I can give you the knowledge, but unless we know what your body needs and what it craves, you'll never be able to kind of quench it. And a lot of it is kind of based on, I was almost my own guinea pig. being overweight, actually obese, as a teenager, and kind of just
Obese isn't
experimenting.
that big though. I mean, I find obese is the term, if you look at it, the science, or like the medical term of it, you don't have to be that big to be considered obese. I don't know, but I think that almost average and like quite slim average is actually considered to be obese, which is, are they moving that, or have they moved that? Because the old style is, I think like a size 8 in America would be considered obese for many people.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, because the measurement that we have for obesity is it's something called the BMI, right? Body mass index, and it only factors in your height and your weight. So a lot of times it's very inaccurate. Number one, because it's, men, for example, are going to have obviously higher weight and they have more muscle, they have like heavier bones. So it's really not going to be affected. So a lot of times with women, you'll find that they have a high BMI that's like obese levels, and they're really not obese. So a more accurate indicator is the waist circumference.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's really where I would say obesity is more
$1 million question. What waist circumference do you need to be considered obese?
Yeah, it depends on your height. There's something called the waist height circumference ratio. So I check it and see. But you're right. A lot of people by BMI standards are considered obese, where they don't necessarily qualify as obese, but maybe overweight, or, as Americans say, pleasantly plump. But yeah.
No, I mean, if by the scale, I'm obese. It's weird, and I'm not. It's weird because, and I'm not in any way obese. I wouldn't have thought. I'm quite slim, but by the scale I think it's probably because of muscle and various different things. It's quite strange.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Like muscle plays a role, but also you might be somebody who has heavier bones, right? So if your bones are heavier, or you're just bigger bones than somebody else, for example, I'm not saying that you are.
Different. I mean, I'm not. I'm
Yeah.
quite slim.
Yeah.
But is there a thing about bigger bones? Is it not that do not all skeletons kind of look the same in the end?
They do look the same. Like let's take a wrist, for example. Don't we all have different wrist sizes? Like I have very small wrists, so I have very, very small wrists. Yeah, but you might have a bigger wrist.
If you can do that,
yeah. Can you put your thumb and your pinky finger together and touch? Most people can't, right? But like if you look at me, I can, right? So I actually have smaller bones, but you have somebody maybe who has bigger, like a little bit of a bigger bone, and your bone's going to weigh heavier, right? Yeah.
I can,
or like someone, like
the top one. I can do the top one. So I can't do those two.
Yeah.
I can do the other ones. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that definitely plays a role, but also like certain races have heavier bones. They're just denser, and they're less likely to develop osteoporosis, for example, which is a very weak, fragile bone. So there's definitely different weights, and I agree with you.
With darker skin, because I think they're less buoyant, aren't they? I think there's a thing about people with darker skin being less buoyant, and that's because they've got heavier bones, but they're better at running. Is that what it is? Yeah.
Africans are less likely to have osteoporosis later on in life versus Caucasians, for example, because they have denser bones. They're also better runners for the same reason. Their bones are just really strong and much stronger than Caucasians, for example. So you have to really look at the person, right, and assess them, and not just their BMI, which is their height and their weight.
It's just weird because in American, I mean, in English, I'm a 10 to a 12, and in American, I'd be a 4 to a 6, and that is actually considered obese. It's
not
weird.
At all.
Yeah. I know it's not at all, but if you look at my like, I've looked at it before, and I've gone I've got a thing on my phone, an app that tells me.
Yeah, it's bad, and I can send you the waist height circumference. I can definitely. I mean, and you if you want to post that when you post this, the waist height circumference and how to calculate it. To me, that's a better indicator. Because it's not, it's not factoring in actual weight. It's factoring in your height and your waist circumference. Because we know that the fat that accumulates in the abdomen area is more dangerous because it's visceral fat and it covers the organs. So that's really where we want to make sure that you're not in obese levels with that.
So you don't want to have a tire around your tummy, for example. That's where it's quite dangerous.
Yeah. And in that sense, you see a lot of males who have higher risk of heart disease, for example, if they have, like, they could be thin, right? Very thin legs, but they have like a belly kind of. And they're at actually higher risk because they have probably more visceral fat, which is covering their organs. And visceral fat is definitely more indicative of inflammation that's also going on in your body, because your cortisol levels, when you're stressed, they're increased, and it tends to hold fat in that area.
Yeah, because they say it's hormones, don't they? Don't they say there are different areas in the body where if you're holding weight in different areas, it's to do with different hormones. Is that an accurate thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely the case. Yeah. Like women have hips, right? Because they have estrogen. So if you have higher estrogen, you tend to hold your fat in your hips more.
Mm.
So, which is why most
So what are
women
the different,
huh?
what are the different areas? So it's because we will have people of all different shapes and sizes listening to.
Yeah.
What
I mean,
areas of the body would relate to what hormones?
yeah, genetics plays a role, right? So if your mom carried her weight in, her belly, for example, then she'll, you're more likely to. So there's that. There's definitely genetics, which you can't really change. But what you can change is, yes, the stress can definitely increase cortisol levels, diabetes also. So a lot of times you'll see that people with high cortisol will tend to carry their weight in their belly, but also sometimes in their shoulders, like they'll have like a thicker neck. Women, if they're more estrogen dominant, will carry less in their belly and more in their hips and thighs and arms, for example. And that's not necessarily, it's better in terms of chronic diseases like heart disease. But if you're more estrogen dominant, then you might put yourself more at risk for breast cancer, for example, or other related conditions. So there's those. But again, it's genetics. Like I have like heavier arms than most people my weight. I'm also like a size 4'6", but if you look at my arms, it's like the size of somebody who's, kind of like very overweight or obese. And that's something that I'm never able to really, lose. So genetics plays a role. Then I have like a really flat stomach. So I don't know.
Good
I
for
mean,
you.
yeah, right. Yeah, I'll take that over the.
Well, I carry it in my thighs. Like if anywhere, I carry it in my thighs.
Yeah.
What's that to do with?
Probably, I think women in general have more estrogen than males, right? So a little bit of, like wider hips is not necessarily a bad thing. But if you're very, I guess, like heavy in the hips where you're carrying all your weight there, it's partly genetics, but it could be, just a little bit of estrogen dominance. So.
And can you resolve estrogen dominance? If that's the thing, if like people are pear shaped or something, is that? I mean, obviously you can do, because I mean, if you want to go for the ideal, you kind of want to be hourglassy. And I know obviously there are ways like lifting weights, building your shoulders, and you've got your hip to shoulder ratio and sort of working on that. But is there a way, if you are, for example, estrogen dominant, or you're more pear shaped to, I'm not, by the way, I'm hourglassy, but just in case people are, is there a way to reduce estrogen in people?
I'm going to say if you're pear shaped by genetics, and it's probably just the bone structure. And, if you're hourglass, same thing, but that it's not a life sentence, right? It's
if you build up your shoulders, then it does.
Exactly. So there's exercise you can build up your shoulder, but a lot of times also, you can, kind of change the way your body utilizes fat. Through intermittent fasting, which I have seen a lot of people, for example, who are more pear-shaped and they do intermittent fasting. What happens is during those times where you're restricting eating, your body has to utilize fat in order to fuel itself, because it's not getting glucose, right, from food. And so it starts to utilize fat from wherever it has like a good storage of it. So I see a lot of times people who practice intermittent fasting on a regular basis will start to see a little bit less, for example, of fat accumulating in the hips, for example, if you're more pear-shaped. But are you going to change your actual pear shape? Probably not, but you can make it look better by, like you said, increasing your shoulder width, exercising there, and doing things that kind of utilize your body's fat storing burning mechanisms. So yeah.
So intermittent fasting is sometimes a little bit controversial. I do it. I'm a fan because I love it.
Yeah,
I know, but then I'm also so torn. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were saying that you need to make sure you eat as much as you can in daylight. And I was doing this sort of starting at 12, and now this week, I mean, I'm always playing with these things, and I was like, oh, that sounds good. Eat in daylight. Now I'm like not having the dinner or having an earlier dinner and trying to sort of have, 3 meals within that time rather than starting later and having 2 bigger meals. It's like, stress on the body. My friend was talking to a doctor about it, saying that there was sometimes it's not very good to have your window, because I was having a 3 or 4 hour window before. Is it too short, or is there a thing about too short of a window and extra stress on the body, which is preventing optimal health? Or what do you think around this stuff?
Yeah, I think intermittent fasting through restricted time eating is amazing. And I will argue with anyone that says that it puts stress on the body or whatever. What puts stress on the body is how someone does fasting. So fasting is such a general term, right? And that's where we run into the problems, because people start to fast for 24, 36 hours where they're not eating at all. Yes, that does put a strain on your body, because your body is built for survival. And if it sees that you're not eating during a 36 to 48 hour period, for example, we're eating very little, it will do what it needs to do to survive, because it doesn't know what you're doing. It doesn't realize.
Starvation mode a thing? Just stop. I mean, I grew up with this whole thing about starvation mode. I think in the 80s we were talking about starvation mode. And if you like, I don't know, I think that we were always fearful, or at least I vaguely remember this from my childhood, saying that, even missing a couple of meals was going to put you into starvation mode, and that was going to mess everything up. And then the next meal you're going to hold on to it. Is starvation mode a thing or not? Or how do you get into starvation mode?
So again, this is why you really have to know how to fast, because if you're starving, which means you're not eating during a longer period, or you're just not having enough calories, your body goes into, oh boy, I don't know what's coming next. I need to survive. So let me store
What
fat.
are those levels? So how long do you have to fast for approximately to do that?
If you're eating a decent amount of calories, and if you want to lose weight, for example, you can still lose weight with fasting. So my perfect window, I guess, is 6 to 8 hours of eating. You can either eat 2 meals or 2 meals and a snack, for example. I don't think you need to eat 3 meals. Most people do not need to eat 3 meals. If you want to eat 3 meals during that time period, fine, make them healthy meals. But if you're eating during a 6 to 8 hour window and you're eating a good amount of calories, meaning 1,300, 1,400, 1,600, and you want to lose weight, you probably will lose weight during that time. If you're restricting to the point where you're eating less than 1,000 calories, right, and you're eating during a 2 or 3 hour window, well, you guess what? You're going to stimulate your body's fight or flight response. And your body doesn't realize Antonia has a grocery store down the street. Your body is it's in survival mode from days of our ancestors not having full access to food. So if it sees that you don't have access to food by restricting during those really severe times, it's gonna build a backup system. And the backup system is store fat, right? We don't know when the next meal's coming in. Send alert, send an alarm, and that's what it does to the cells. So you don't want that. You want to restrict your eating times to 6 to 8 hours where it's a reasonable amount of food.
Is 3 or 4 okay as well? I quite like just
I would say occasionally 3 or 4 okay. Don't make it the habit. So I'll tell my patients, you can fast a 24-hour fast like once a month, because a 24-hour fast tends to stimulate a process where we're getting rid of all these dysfunctional cells. It's called autophagy. And so that's good. We want that. But not on a regular basis. Autophagy kicks in usually around 18 to 20 hours. So yes, we want autophagy, but we also, it's like a fine line. We don't want to stimulate that increased cortisol and stress hormone production where we're storing fat instead. And the way to avoid that is to really eat modestly, but within modest time period. So you're not alerting your body. And I've made a few videos on this on my social media, because I get a lot of women who ask me this, women who are trying to get fertile, pregnant, or even during menopause. And I say it's really dependent on the type of fast that you're doing. And they've done studies on this. They've done studies on women who were trying to get pregnant, and they were put on a fasting regimen. And what they found was that if it's, again, a modest fasting regimen, it actually increases fertility, because that little bit of weight loss actually helps your body become more fertile. Same with menopause. When you're not eating all the time, you're not making as much estrogen, right? And post-menopause, estrogen dominance is not a good thing, because that's what increases your risk of cancers like endometrial cancer, but breast cancer as well. So I would say for you were asking about eating during the daytime.
Mm.
The general is
the whole thing. Oh, eat when the sun's out. Is that a thing or not really?
The general rule is do not eat within 3 to 4 hours before you sleep. So if you're sleeping at 10 or 11, don't eat for 3 hours before, because what you want is those backup mechanisms that your body has to burning fat to kick in. So when they start kicking in, and a lot of times people will eat dinner, for example, and then they'll feel really hungry right before they sleep.
Right.
Just ignore that, because what that is your body is signaling to you, almost like it wants to know, are you going to feed me? Or am I going to kick into my secondary mechanisms, which is burning of other sources of fuel, like glucose stores in the liver and also fat. So your body's almost like checking with you. Okay, what's going on? And then you just ignore it and you wake up, you're probably not even hungry when you wake up because your body's kicked into those backup mechanisms.
So what about ketosis? When do you actually get into ketosis, which is fat burning?
Yeah, it depends on the person. Most people will kick into ketosis around 16 to 18 hours.
Okay. So, even if you've, does it make a difference if you only had protein or whether you've had carbs, or how does that all work?
So people who only eat protein and fat, right, and they're on keto diets, they'll kick into ketosis sooner because they're not eating carbs. But what happens there is if they're really restricting their, and I'm not saying carbs are healthy, like refined carbs are not healthy, but vegetables have carbs, fruits have carbs. So if you're really restricting those plant-based fibers that your gut bacteria need and thrive on, you might lose weight on a keto diet, right, which is high fat, high protein. But your gut is probably going to suffer as a result, and it might not be right away. But after a few years of doing keto, strictly keto, you're depleting your gut of those really important bacteria that feed on plant-based fibers. So when people say ketosis, yes, ketosis is great, but induce it through fasting, because there's two ways the body can induce ketosis: through a high-fat protein diet, right, just keto, which induces ketosis faster, like you're asking, or ketosis through fasting, which is what you really want, because you're getting the benefits of ketosis on your weight loss and your brain, but then you're also feeding your gut healthy foods.
But aren't you going, if you're doing 16 to 18 hours fasting, and it takes you that long to get into ketosis?
You know what? When you're somebody that's done this for a while, your body kicks into ketosis more automatically, and it could kick in earlier. So I actually
you're going to be in it very long or at all. If you're doing sort of 16 to 18 hours, that's your 6 to 8 hour window. And it sounds like as soon as you're in ketosis, you're eating again. Is that?
Well, there's ways to maximize ketosis. So for example, what I'll tell people is, yes, you'll kick into ketosis for after 16 to 18 hours. Sure. But you know what? If you want to like really maximize your ketosis, exercise in the morning before you eat.
So, exercise before you eat, that maximizes the ketosis. Ooh, we did that
your first meal. Yes, because why? Well, you're already in ketosis, and now you need to provide fuel for your muscles. So your body's like, oh no, what do? Oh, let me burn more fat so I can provide fuel, right, for muscle cells. So that's one way to do it. You can extend to 20 hours every once in a while, or 24 hours, where I tell my patients like once a month. And then you're kicking into that autophagy, which is the immune benefits that we want. So you don't want your body getting used to one specific thing all the time, because if you're fasting,
body likes change.
One meal, 24 hours, then your body's like, okay, this is her norm. She must be living in the forest and has access to food once a day. And I'm just going to adjust my metabolism. So you got to like, you really have to kind of like change it up for your body a little bit. So yes, you do this, it kicks into ketosis. It starts to go into auto mode where it just turns into ketosis pretty quickly, but you don't want it to get used to one specific thing. So even for me, like I'll do 16 to 18 hours, 4 to 5 days a week. And then 2 days in the week, I'll eat normally.
Right. Yeah.
You want to let your body know that this is not the status quo. Yeah. Like,
the body likes change. The body just likes change. That's just how it is. So you just
yes, as we all do, right? No one wants change. So yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so any pearls of wisdom or anything else you would like to discuss before we close?
Let's see. Okay, so I'll give like a few simple tips to people who maybe want to increase or improve their gut health, but also weight loss. These are so simple. Number one, if you want to have something sweet, have it after a non-sweet meal, like a savory meal. So for example, if you want to have dessert, eat it after your dinner, which should be majority plant-based and a little bit of protein or a little bit of another carb, for example. And the reason is that when you start your body off with a high fiber food, your stomach is taking longer to digest it. It goes into your intestines and it doesn't cause that glucose spike, right? Because your body has to digest the fiber. And so it causes a more stable glucose spike. So if you follow it with a sweet, it's not the first thing your body sees. So your body's working on kind of digesting that fiber, and then it's almost like it's already raising the blood glucose levels. So it's not a huge spike. So that helps people with weight loss. It definitely makes a difference in blood glucose levels too.
We can have dessert. That's what I'm hearing. We can have dessert
every once in a while. Don't make it a routine, but a lot of times people think you need to have like a piece of chocolate cake every time. Just have a fruit. Fruit is dessert too. So, but if you are going to have something sweet,
you're talking about fruit as sweetness.
No, you can have. I have chocolate. I have everything. I have everything and anything I want, just in moderation. And so that's something that you can do. Have it after your meal. That's one big one. Another one really is, think about it, is you're not feeding you. You're feeding these trillions of organisms in your gut. So feed them what they like, which is cultured foods that already have those probiotics, like yogurts, and fermented foods are great because they already have live cultures. So you're just increasing the
I love kimchi. That's very good for you, isn't it?
Yes, kimchi is great. Yep. And plant-based fibers. So they love plant-based fibers because they get to digest those and produce byproducts that are amazing for our body. So,
okay. Oh, I think you've. Sorry, I lost you just for a second. You said fibers. They like all these gut fibers.
They love plant-based fibers. That's their favorite food because it allows them to be satisfied and produce these byproducts that we need in our body.
So. Okay, so all of those things. Any other supplements or anything that people should be going for? Or are you more like get it from real food and eat organic or not organic? What do you feel about all of that?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to do everything organic. It depends on the food, but I would say anything without a thick shell, like fruit-wise or vegetable-wise, definitely get organic. Do not get farmed fish of any kind. It's horrible, in my opinion. Also,
dyed, isn't it, as well? They dye it.
They do a lot of
things like that. It comes out gray, doesn't it? And then they just
Or even if you look at like farmed salmon and compare it to wild salmon, the wild is such a bright, vibrant color, and the farmed is not. So that's one thing I would say definitely to avoid. Also.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Christine. This has been very, very enlightening. And you're also you are saying to stay away from Ozempic and to just get your gut working properly rather than going for these other pharmaceuticals, which
I would say for 80% of individuals that just want to lose weight and have no medical problems, stay away from the Ozempic because there are a lot of long-term complications that we're seeing, but also short-term. Like a lot of people don't realize it's working by slowing down your digestive system. And so a lot of people will start having bloating and delayed emptying of the stomach contents. Constipation is a big one. So yes, I recommend a lifestyle modification for most people because even if you do the Ozempic, you're going to gain the weight if you're not. Yeah, because what happens is you're losing weight frequently, quickly, and your body's utilizing muscle. So you're going to gain a lot of muscle when you gain weight. I'm sorry, you're going to lose a lot of muscle when you gain weight. But also, why not eat foods that stimulate a natural Ozempic effect? But that being said,
what are the foods that stimulate a natural Ozempic effect? $1 million question, Christine.
Oh, right. I'll tell you that. But let me just tell you, I'm not completely opposed to Ozempic. Like for people who are diabetic, they need it. I'm fine with that. But also people who are, obese and have risk factors like chronic conditions or heart disease, definitely they need to lose weight quickly. And if they're not able to, then I definitely recommend. You have to weigh the risks and the benefits. Foods that increase a natural Ozempic effect. It's the same foods our gut microbes love. Plant-based fibers, inulin, resistant starch. Those satisfy our gut bacteria and they send signals through that PYY pathway I told you about. that
Just
pathway.
give us a list. Give us a list. We're writing it down.
Yeah, absolutely. Inulin-based foods, very, very good at stimulating that natural Ozempic foods. What are inulin-based foods? Foods like artichokes, asparagus. Those are high in inulin. Foods like onions, raw onions are high in inulin.
Raw. I mean,
Yeah.
red ones, not raw red onions. What about
Yes,
cooked
exactly.
onions?
Yeah, nobody can eat a raw regular onion. Yes, yes.
Or spring onions? You talking about spring onions, or you call them
Spring
something
onions or the red ones.
Okay, yeah, which are purple. Don't know why they're called red.
Yeah. Resistant starch is another one. Like sweet potatoes are really good also. Foods containing pectin, like apples with their skins on, really good also. So let's see, walnuts, nuts are really good too. Not a lot because they're high in fat.
I love nuts.
Like a little handful. And then you want to increase.
It's really difficult to do.
The handful, yeah.
Yeah.
They're so good. Fermented foods are really important. Yeah. So because those again are providing your gut with it's like a quick entry of bacteria. You don't have to make them. You're actually like bringing them right in. Come on in, So kefir and yogurt have a lot of natural probiotics.
Do you think pickles are good as well, or is that less?
Those are amazing. Yes.
Pickles are amazing. Oh,
yes. I just posted something about pickle juice. The acid in pickle juice is really good for muscle cramps, but pickles are cultured. Yeah. They're fermented and they have bacteria that your body needs. So absolutely, pickles are great.
So drink some more martinis. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, you have to be careful with the alcohol because alcohol, think about like alcohol when you put rubbing alcohol in your hands. Sanitizer, what do? You're killing bacteria. So alcohol tends to do the same thing in your gut. So you have to limit the alcohol because it can kind of have the opposite effect. So
alcohol with edamame.
Edamame, yeah. Edamames are really, really a very nutritious food to have.
I love them. They're delicious.
Yeah, they are. They're great.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think anything else to close, or just a little or little
no, I mean, I know you're very into emotional trauma and stress, and I also agree with you. I think.
Oh, what was that study? You were going to tell me about the ACE study. Tell me
the ACE study, yeah. So the ACE study is a study that was done on people who took a survey about childhood traumas, and the higher their score, their ACE score on the study relating to childhood trauma, the more likely they were to have chronic diseases as adults. So, many conditions like heart disease, diabetes, a lot of medical problems stem from emotional trauma. And we know mental health issues stem from emotional trauma, but a lot of people don't realize that there's also a link to chronic illnesses and your health, your actual physical health too. I recommend everyone kind of look at the ACE study and take the ACE test. And if you're having stress and you're dealing with this trauma, get help, because there are ways that you can release that emotional trauma. And I think that's something that you do, which I'm also.
I just love emotional trauma. Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, disease is caused by emotional trauma, and they come in 3 categories: a gas, a liquid, or a solid. So when you hang around somebody who's sad or angry or upset in any way, you can feel it immediately. You can walk into a room after an argument, and you can feel the atmosphere. You can cut the atmosphere with a knife, as something that we say. And I'd say that's like a gas. It's like a gas that follows people around, because you can feel it. An anxious person, you're around an anxious person, it can kind of make you anxious, or a depressed person. It's quite difficult sometimes because it can pull you down.
Yeah.
And a happy person, it's also contagious, right? All these moods are contagious, but they're like a gas because they follow people around and they fill a room. So I say emotional diseases are gas-based diseases, and then we've got a liquid and a solid. So then we've got a liquid. So if we get very stuck thinking about a particular trauma or a repeating pattern in some way, then we're going to be thinking about it, and that's going to be creating more and more gas. So that goes somewhere. So for example, backache, if you continue to think about not feeling supported, there's particular reasons behind different things. So not feeling supported is backache. So all of your thoughts about not feeling supported in whatever part of your life it may be, they all go to that specific location of your back. And enough of them over so long, they run out of space. Enough gas going into a finite space becomes a liquid. And if you think about back pain, sometimes it's a 10 out of 10, sometimes it's a 2 out of 10. Its location moves. It behaves like a fluid, but it's the compressed thoughts of that gas, which becomes a liquid because you've been thinking about it for so long. So chronic pain is a liquid-based disease, but it's just about your thoughts compressed. Something like a cyst is a literal ball of fluid, and that is just literally your thoughts compressed. I had a uterine cyst many years ago, and I looked it up in my textbook, which is called Metaphysical Anatomy for anyone who's interested. And I worked through it, and I was actually in an abusive relationship at the time, and I was very resentful of him. And I read the book, and I've read this book for many, many years. It's very dog-eared. I've read it thousands of times, and I was like, damn it, that's exactly right. And I deleted those emotions, and my cyst was gone in 3 days, and I've got the scans before and after to prove it. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Those emotions. Then solid-based diseases like a tumor, that's to do with that's just more compression, isn't it? So a liquid, it slows down and it cools down. A liquid becomes a solid by slowing and cooling. And that's what that is. So a benign tumor would be a solid-based disease, which is really interesting because it's just really, really, really hard. If you press a tumor, it's hard. But if you have a cancerous tumor, that's actually popped. It's actually gone so full that the balloon has popped, and then it starts spreading around the body because it's actually run out of space. And then it becomes a liquid again because it starts spreading around the body. That's when it's an active tumor. Yeah.
This is really fascinating. I wanted to ask you, because you were saying about your thoughts, like what if, because a lot of times people with emotional trauma don't even realize like it's on a subconscious level. So what would you do for them?
I delete it. I mean, I can delete things. I have very easily. I just get people to roundabout think about it, and I can sort of go in there and hoover it up. I had someone many years ago who had depression, and that, you know, my level 2 students got rid of that in a very, very short time. In less than 10 minutes, his depression, that he had chronic depression for many, many years, was gone by my level 2 students. And that was years ago. But the one I did recently was a benign tumor, and I deleted all the emotions around this benign tumor. And the tumor, my Spring, who's one of the practitioners, was in absolute agony. She was unable to leave her bed, really. And she messaged me, and I worked on her with my new technique, which is called source code. And I deleted all of that. And the following day, she was able to cycle and do yoga. And the day after, she had another scan, and it had vanished. There was a shadow of it, and they thought she'd been misdiagnosed.
Do you incorporate any kind of homeopathic things as well with that?
I've studied something called vibrational medicine, and I am a homeopath. It's using little tincture bottles, and I used that years ago, but I tend not to need to. I've got a lot of know-how, and I've got a potentizer machine, and I've got hundreds and hundreds of homeopathic remedies, but I don't need to use them anymore. I just literally delete the associated emotion, and diseases often fall out. The solid-based diseases are significantly harder. Like an active tumor is very, very difficult to do. Benign ones I've got to, but the other ones apart from my friend's skin, my friend had a probable basal cell carcinoma melanoma. She had 4 or 5 doctors say that that's what they suspected, but you can't definitely have it until they do a biopsy. They cut it open, they check it, and they tell you it's cancerous or not. But she had 4 or 5 doctors say that's what it looks like. I deleted those emotions, and it was gone in 5 days.
This is a basal cell carcinoma?
Yeah. Basal cell carcinoma. Yeah.
Possibly.
I can't
I've seen the documentary Heal. I don't know. Have you seen that one?
Yeah.
What do you think of what they do in that? Because that sounds similar to what you do.
Beautiful. Yeah. My stuff, I like to do it sort of in one go. I think a lot of these techniques are absolutely wonderful. You need to go and do things multiple times. I'm trying to do things in one go, like a one-hit stop, and that's what it tends to be. You know, I delete those emotions; they don't exist in people's consciousness anymore. And then it's all from my mind, disease are neon signs saying, "Hey, honey, there's a blockage here. Hey, honey, you're not listening. Hey," and it's literally saying that. So when that doesn't, and it's just trying to get your attention, and then from my textbook, it's really interesting because you read it and people have got 4 or 5 different issues and they're actually the same underpinning. And it's just like that bit there, that bit there. It's the same message. You haven't dealt with X, Y, and Z. And it's a massive overlap. And it's the body just trying to get you to deal with whatever needs dealing with. So then I delete that and lots of different illnesses dissipate very, very, very rapidly. Yeah.
I mean, I am a believer in your body like giving you signs and symptoms and kind of warning signs. And a lot of times people ignore them or don't listen, and then things just get worse.
We don't have the map. We don't have the map, and we don't understand. And unfortunately, a lot of people, and we are indoctrinated to take a lot of medication, and the medication covers the symptoms. It doesn't actually really seek to solve the problem. I mean,
I'm a believer in that. As a traditional,
on the why of the disease. Yeah, and trying to fix it from behind, not cover up the symptoms. So that's why
root cause is what we need to focus on more than medications. I do believe there is a place for medications, but I think for the majority of people, they never really tap into that root cause.
Do you know what? I used to, and now I've gone so far down the rabbit hole. I think that what you're doing is beautiful, because you're looking to get to the root cause. I definitely think in emergency care, we need medicine for emergency care, and everything else, we shouldn't be disguising symptoms. What we should be doing is finding out why and fixing the why.
I definitely agree with you on that. I agree. Root causes should be the primary goal of any physician. And I think we need to almost be retrained in that.
I do.
Yeah.
And I know that as a doctor, at least in the UK, there is a very, very small focus on nutrition when you're studying to be a doctor.
Same in the US. Yeah, same everywhere in the world, to be honest. Right. I mean, I kind of delved into the whole nutrition thing just from my personal experience, but also interest. But yeah, I mean, most of my colleagues don't really have enough information on nutrition. And also, we're not really given the time to talk to our patients about that.
It's very quick. And then
the healthcare system, it just doesn't allow it. And that's the sad thing.
Well, I mean, the problem, this is a, more philosophical issue, I guess, but the problem, one of the issues that I have with the medical system as it is, it's not healthcare, it's illness care. So what you do is somebody who gets well is a lost customer. So what you do is you end up, they come and they pay you and then they give you medication.
Yeah.
In China, what they used to do, back in the day in China, what they used to do is you used to regularly go and see your doctor, and their job is to keep you well. And they would give you different potions and tinctures and herbs and exercises and foods and all sorts of different treatments, acupuncture, I'm sure, cupping, all those different things, a variety of treatments. And if you got sick, you didn't pay them.
Really?
Yes, you paid to keep you well. So if you got sick, that was on them, and it was their job to treat you for free because it was their mistake for you getting sick. We have entirely the opposite. So you're not necessarily incentivized to actually treat people and get them well because they're a lost customer, which is it's a really dark way of looking at it. But unfortunately, there seems to be that way in the world.
Well, and you mentioned is this like ancient Chinese medicine? Or
100 years ago, not that long ago, but a few hundred years ago, until we really came in with penicillin. We came in with penicillin. We came in with our diseases and penicillin. And then most of the stuff that they were doing was fine. But then whatever penicillin was treating was not something that they could do in the viruses were not something they could do within Chinese medicine. So then it sort of got taken over from there. But before then, anytime before then, so that must have been within the last 100 years or so, I would think.
Well, and you speak about like the last 100 years, but I'm even thinking further back, like Hippocrates, right? The father of medicine.
Yes.
He would always come up with these terms like melancholy. Where do we get the term melancholy? Black bile is what it's translated to. And he believed that a lot of people with depression, it was because they had an internal hold of, like intestinal juices that weren't just being released. And a lot of times you think, well, maybe he was seeing, gut microbiome issues, right? So that term melancholy, we're kind of seeing it now and doing full circle where you're looking at your body's actually just holding on to things that are not healthy for it in the long term. And I feel in a way like, I think nowadays we're a society where we have too much information, and I think it clogs your mind, right? Like you really have to go back to the simple things. Very simple methods of healing are more important in my opinion.
Well, happiness, you know, and happiness,
Yeah,
I think to a large extent is a choice. It's, you know, making moves to do
absolutely.
things which actually bring you joy, you know, and actually
Great.
getting out of your chair and turning off the telly and going and doing things, going and being outside, getting your morning sun and go and do things that bring you joy. And then you bring more happiness. And I think the more you know, the more active you are to pursue your happiness, the better your health becomes. And I think that's vital.
Yeah.
You know, if you're very happy, you're less likely to get sick, is what I believe.
Yeah, no, they've done studies on that. Mindset is everything. Even like one of my favorite quotes, Abraham Lincoln said, "A man is about as happy as he makes up his mind to be." So, right? Isn't that good?
That's
So,
beautiful.
yeah, absolutely. Happiness and mindset is everything. So,
Wonderful. That's a beautiful thing to close on. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Christine. This has been
thank you. It
very
was really nice chatting with you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.